All right, it's another edition of the Wpial Blitz Show. I'm Badge. There's Mr. Stats Geek Wpial Ian, and we expect Ryan Linn to join us from Moon Area, the top-ranked 5A program in District 7, undefeated so far. So hopefully Ryan will be joining us here in a little bit. Hey, sometimes you got stuff that you got to do. And just like Ian, a lot of times, I think if any of our regular viewers understand that sometimes when you start these shows, things happen, right, Ian?
Absolutely. We did one of our preview shows with one of my daughters, or my daughter actually, on my lap, and one of my other kids, crawling on me. So, yeah, I know Coach Linn
This is
has a
a
few kids,
family
and it's a
show.
family show. Exactly. We are totally understanding of people's schedules, but it was an exciting week in the WPIAL last week. Conference play kicked off for a lot of the other conferences that hadn't started yet. So
Finally,
it's
finally,
you know
finally.
a lot of everyone's into conference play now. Playoff races are going to start to take shape here over the next few weeks as we get farther into October. And my family, speaking of families, we took a trip to Bell Vernon to the beach to
Oh,
say
the beach.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was so cool.
so last week we interviewed Matt Humbert, the head coach at Bell Vernon, and took my family down there to experience it. And let me tell you something, like seeing a picture of it's one thing, but seeing it in person, it's so cool. It's
It's
it's a
gotta be like
really
great.
cool atmosphere. Yeah. And the field kind of sits down, that it's the stadium's on top of a hill, but you go in at the top of the hill and kind of go down into the bleachers on the home side, and then the field sits down, then you have the visiting side bleachers. So it is kind of like, I mean, I don't want to, no offense to the Aliquippa people who call their stadium the Pit, but it is kind of a pit type
Kind of
feeling. not
yeah,
not
right.
like the Aliquippa Pit, don't get me wrong, but it
All
is
right, here's
still.
Ryan.
Yeah.
Here's
Oh,
Ryan.
great. Excellent.
And welcome to Ryan Linn, head coach of Moon Area. How are you, coach?
Good, guys. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for joining us. We're just getting started here and really appreciate it that you've been able to join us.
Well, you're welcome.
Go ahead,
So
Ian.
for starters, congratulations on a undefeated start, being the only undefeated team in 5A right now, the top ranked team according to most of the Wpial rankings that are out there. So how are you feeling so far?
I mean, it's a testament to our kids and kind of the effort and time they put into this right now. So it's a nice feeling, but still not satisfied. Like we've been preaching to the kids, those first 5 weeks were really cool but didn't mean nothing in regards to playoffs. So that started last week with South Fayette. So we're going to try to keep that thing rolling here.
So talk a little bit about about your team. Obviously when coaches come into a season, they're thinking that the team is going to evolve a certain way with chemistry and everything else. So when you were looking at your team or what you thought your team was going to be coming into this year, how would you rank your team on how they actually are through the first 5 weeks?
Um, I think it's hard to put an expectation on. I think if you set it, not say too high, but if you come in and you explain it, it's a little bit. You can be disappointed if something maybe doesn't go right away. So just looking at our kids, knowing we were going to have 20 plus seniors on our roster, having 9, 10 starters back on both sides of the ball, you were expecting some high expectations for this group. They've now. I forgot I was talking to, but I was telling them, they're asking about like our team, and I said these kids have been playing against they're 7 and 8 years old, and that's I think one of the coolest things about this group is they've been together from the time they were in second, third grade all the way up through. So to have this success together is pretty cool for them on that part. But to get back to, I think just expecting them to be mature and handle some things, and I think some kids have developed a little bit more physically. Some guys have stepped up and grown into some roles to allow us to be like a little more physical, a little more like, run first team, which has kind of been our MO this year, as we were able to kind of be that mature senior laden team that was able to kind of like be a little more physical and kind of use that maturity to our strength.
So you took over as head coach in 2017, and before that, Moon had just had 2 playoff appearances in the prior 10 years and hadn't had a playoff win in the last decade. And you not only won a conference title a couple of years ago in 2019, but won a playoff game also and snapped that streak for a high school with a proud tradition. I mean, I remember when I was in high school back in the early 2000s, like Moon was one of those teams you had to watch out for because they were, won a championship in the late 90s, had a couple semifinal appearances early in the 2000s. So, have you felt like the community kind of come back behind the team as you've had success both, in 2019 with the conference title, and then last year you had a 500 plus record, and this year, off to your hot start?
Yeah, I think it's really, I don't know if it was COVID has play on like the amount of fans we get because more people are just trying to get out and do stuff. But ever since week 0 at Seneca, like, sitting back and kind of just taking it all in again because you maybe took it for granted last year not having any fans there. But, we have sophomores and freshmen at, going to Seneca, never traveled for a game, never played in front of a varsity crowd. So for them to experience that was cool. But I think like our community, the last 3 home games has been unbelievable. We've probably had over 2,000 people, and we've had something going on every night. And the kids have put on a great show for everybody, and so the community support's really there. So it's been a lot of fun here.
That's great.
Yeah, talk a little bit about your coaching staff too, Coach. I mean, have you pretty much had these guys, with you the whole time that you started at Moon, or are you still in the process of, bringing in some new guys?
So our core group, when I came back on in 2015 with Brendan Hathaway as one of his assistants, since I was in the district, him and I kind of started piecing the staff together then. So since we've been back in 15, or I've been back, Shane Newhouse has been our defense coordinator for the last 7 years. Neil Katz has been our offensive line and defense line coach for those last 7 years. And Sean Besong's been our special teams coordinator for the last 6. So, and I've been the offensive coordinator since 2015. So the core pieces, myself, Coach Shane, Neil, and Sean have kind of been here. And then over the years, we've added, some other guys who've been like Dean Chazer's come along, been here since 2018 with me. Had a couple guys who've been middle school guys who've been come up. So we've kind of kept the staff in place. I added a couple younger assistants this summer to help that have played at the collegiate level that allowed to kind of keep that young rapport with the kids. So we're always adding pieces, guys that we think can help us. So I think right now we got a pretty good staff in place that allows us to maintain some success here over the next couple of years.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, last week we interviewed Matt Humbert, the head coach down at Belle Vernon, and he talked a lot about how important that staff consistency is to have year after year, because you can really kind of build the kids up and kind of teach them the system over time too, and you're not changing a lot on them.
Oh, I think that's huge, because once you get things in place, if I've always said at some point here, I'm going to probably give up the reins of calling this offense, just because to run a program the right way, at some point I have to give that up. So having a system in place and then having someone kind of run your system, but maybe run it the way that they're comfortable is fine with me, because it allows me to do the other things that I think, as a head coach, you need to do. But I think that's been the biggest thing I've said for years here. The lack of consistency since Mark Capuano left has been, I think, one of the biggest issues we've had. We've had some major struggles here in the last 10 years. Was just, it was a revolving door of coaches for a 10-year period. There was 4 coaches in here. I was the 5th one in a 10-year window. So
wow,
consistency is huge, especially at a high school level.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are you expecting out of Peters Township this week?
Oh, I'm expecting them to be, I don't know if I can say pissed off, but they're probably going to be pissed off this week.
You can say it.
Okay. The last time they got beat by that many points was last year with the championship game. So I'm expecting TJ to have those guys ready to roll this week. I don't know who, if he had some guys out or whatnot, but I told our kids today, I said, you anticipate them to come at you with everything they have to prove that last week was a fluke and they're a better team than that. So he graduated. We've talked about it over the weekend. Like I said, I'm not looking at last year's film, not because I don't think I need to. It's they're missing 2 Division I kids in the middle of that defense that just gave us fits for 3 years with Corbin Hondry and Donovan McMillan, who were both playing at their respective universities. He's got some very athletic kids, and the McCosco kid, Nico Payne, Richie Woods. He's got some guys that can flat out play. So we're gonna have our hands full on Friday, but I'm expecting a football game.
Yeah. Do you guys feel like, since obviously you said it's a completely different team with Peters with everyone they graduated, but do you feel like they're kind of still the team to beat in the conference, even since they won the last 2 conference titles? Or
I think you have to. I mean, they've played the last 2 Wpial championship games. So you got a team you got kids who've played on a tradition. TJ built something really good down there. So those kids are going to be poised to come back and play the show. Like, I guess play Peters Township football. So I'm expecting them to come out and give us fits and do everything they've done the last couple of years. And our kids hopefully will respond and play like we're capable of playing.
Yeah. And you certainly didn't get any favors from the Wpial when they aligned the conferences, putting you in with, not only Peters, but Upper St. Clair, South Fayette, Bethel Park, West Allegheny. I mean, it's like the SEC of the Wpial. I mean, it's just a loaded schedule back to back to back.
I mean, like, when you think of schedule, like, I don't mind the first 5 weeks because it's nice to play some non-conference games, see where you're at. But then you got to go in that grind. Like, we play South Fayette, Peters, Upper St. Clair, those 3 in a row. Plus, then you got Bethel Park, who's had a great win last week against West Allegheny, so they're getting better. And then you got to play a rival week 10. So, knowing those guys over there and having coached over there that they're going to want to beat you just because they don't want to lose. So,
yeah,
next 4 weeks are going to be a dogfight here.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and best of luck the rest of the way. And hopefully we can talk to you again come playoff time.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care,
Thank you very
Ryan.
much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Take care. See you later.
Bye.
Bye. So he kind of touched on what I've been touching on for like ever here is, the difference. You're playing 2 seasons, one season where you're going through literally a preseason schedule, and then you get into that gigantic dogfight of a conference schedule. Now, granted, it isn't, it's a finite, 5 games or what have you that they're doing it, but clearly when speaking to these coaches, when they talk like that, there's a clear definition between, I don't want to say that games don't matter, but games certainly don't matter as much. And, it is what it is. Like I said, it's the single biggest thing that I sit there and shake my head at every single week.
Yeah. And I think it's more pronounced in 5A than it is in some of the other classifications, because 5A was the only classification where all 3 conferences had to wait until week 5 to start conference play. Every other classification, at least, 2 of the conferences, sometimes all 3, sometimes, started conference play, 2 weeks ago. But in 5A, with only 18 teams that they split up into 3 conferences of 6, you only have 5 conference games then. So, and they just completely backloaded the schedule with all the conference games. So,
and then you roll right into the postseason. I mean, it's like they're just kind of getting slammed with way too much too fast.
Yeah. And maybe something that gets looked at in the future is, you potentially could start conference play, like in 5A, you could start it 2 weeks earlier, but then only have 2 conference matchups and 2 non-conference matchups each week, into the season.
Why do they have to have it segregated as, they could if the WPIAL is making up the schedule, pepper the conference and non-conference games, to where it isn't such back end loaded.
Yeah.
Like you talked about.
Yeah. And I think that was kind of in response to some of the complaints, and honestly, some of the complaints that I had with their previous schedule, where they had the non-conference game, the conferences were bigger before. If this had been 4 years ago and we were in this situation, they would have done 2 conferences of 9 teams each rather than 3 of 6, right? And you would have had some terrible travel schedules, but you would have had conference games basically from week 1 through week 9, and would have had
a meaningful schedule.
and only one non-conference game. But with only one non-conference game, that would have kind of locked you in for who your crossover opponent was. And what they did in the past was they kind of just had a scheduling template and had a computer fill it in, and kind of whoever else landed with that open week. And they filled it in kind of alphabetically. So this was really bad in like 1A, where you had Clairton was the, first alphabetical team in their conference, and then Avella was the first alphabetical team in their conference. So you were getting games where Clairton was beating Avella like 58-0 at halftime and like winning 82-0 because they got matched up by the Wpial's like computer schedule. So one of the things they did this time around was they were a little more purposeful about it and said, okay, we're going to try and match up like the good teams against the good teams. So you got Clairton, instead of playing Avella, against like Washington and Steel Valley, two pretty good.
Yeah, but it doesn't
2A
matter. It doesn't matter when the total body of work doesn't count toward determining playoffs. What does it matter?
It doesn't, but you also get better non-conference games. You get less.
I agree.
Yeah.
I can't disagree with that. But anyway, you're in control, man. Let's do it.
So let's talk about what all happened this past week in the WPIAL. So some key results. I talked about going to visit Bell Vernon. They beat Laurel Highlands. Laurel Highlands, whose head coach we interviewed a few weeks ago, was off to their first 5-0 start in school history. Bell Vernon was undefeated. So arguably the biggest regular season game in Laurel Highlands school history. And it was close for the first half. Laurel Highlands was hanging in there. They were down 14-7 right before halftime. We're driving. Ball got intercepted by Bell Vernon. Bell Vernon's star quarterback, Devin Whitlock, ran for 61 yards 2 plays later to take it down to the 5-yard line. They punched it in for a touchdown. We're up, 14-point swing there to go up 21-7 at halftime. And then in the second half, Bell Vernon just kind of poured it on. The three best games of the week, and I kind of have to tell all three of these stories. So Newcastle was down 10-7 to Montour with like 12 seconds left, and had a fourth down from like the 17-yard line and threw a touchdown pass to win basically as time expired. Trinity kicked a field goal to win as time expired. And then Bentworth and Jefferson Morgan, Bentworth came from behind in that game and wound up, Jefferson Morgan scored a touchdown to go up 48-42 with, I think, just over a minute left. And then Bentworth went back down the field and scored and kicked the game-winning extra point with like 7 seconds left. So, just a three great, end of game, last second scores to win. In some just fantastic games. Deer Lake's pulling off the upset of the week. They're now 3-0 in conference play, so maybe we shouldn't call it an upset anymore. But after going winless last year, that's a great win for the Lancers over an East Allegheny team that, we kind of thought was potentially a top 2 or 3 team in the Allegheny 7 conference there in 3A. So great win for Deer Lake's, putting themselves in position to make the playoffs. Some other noteworthy results, Mount Lebanon really taking it to North Allegheny. Hampton beating Greensburg-Salem in a battle of unbeatens in the Greater Allegheny Conference. Elizabeth Forward topping South Park to put themselves on top of the Interstate Conference in 3A. Steel Valley just pounding Ligonier Valley. Our guy Najee Burt, who had 5 touchdowns a few weeks ago, had another.
Ligonier Valley was undefeated going into that game.
Yeah, they were both undefeated. So now Steel Valley's kind of set themselves up as the primary challenger for Sarah Catholic in that conference. Clairton winning a battle with Bishop Canavan. Clairton had 3 defensive scores in that game, 2 defensive touchdowns and a safety to beat Bishop Canavan. West Green, who was my preseason pick to win the Tri-County South, and I got some flack for it on Twitter. Hi, Nathan Grella and the PA Backyard Football folks. That, you said you thought I had West Green a little overrated. Well, they've beaten California and Carmichael's now and look like they have a clear path to the Tri-County South.
Look like you're title. Vindicated.
It's fun to call people out, okay. Especially when I'm right. Although I'll take the heat when I'm wrong too. And then Rochester, after that week 3 loss to Union, getting back on the right horse by beating Olsh and putting themselves back in the conference title race. So our player of the week this week, this was a tough decision, but it goes to Jake Gettico from Bell Vernon, The story here was that Bell Vernon star running back Quentin Martin, who is a sophomore and already has Division I offers, injured his knee last week, or it might have been ankle, leg injury against Thomas Jefferson. And so they had to bring in another sophomore to fill in. And all this kid did was run for 247 yards and 5 touchdowns as their backup running back, filling in for the injured Quentin Martin. So a great performance in leading, Bell Vernon to the win over Laurel Highlands. And yeah, so congratulations to Jake Gettico on winning the Player of the Week award. This was a tough one because we had 4 players in the WPIAL account for 5 touchdowns each this week.
Oh my.
So not only did Jake do it, but Najee Burt from Steel Valley, Jaron Brickner, quarterback from Beaver Falls, threw for 3, ran for 2. Johnny Huff, the quarterback from Neshannock, threw for 2 and ran for 3. And then just one of the best stories all around, which is why he made the list, CJ Miller, running back from Shenango. I know in comparison to these other ones, it doesn't look like many stats, 103 yards and 3 touchdowns. But CJ, unfortunately, lost his dad earlier this week. So he played following a game where his father died earlier this week. Our prayers go out to his family. The team wore stickers on their helmets, and he had 103 yards and 3 touchdowns. So what a great gutty performance from CJ Miller there.
Incredible.
Yeah. And I'll mention too that if you're just watching this on YouTube, check steelcityblitz.com for the article with this, the video in it. I'll post the link. There's a GoFundMe for the family too. So I'll post the link.
Good job. Good job. Good job with that, Ian.
Thanks. So moving on to the streak watch, which is, I know,
a lot more red on this screen than there normally is.
This was the week of streaks being broken in the WPIL. My goodness. We had, Moon moves up to now having the second longest winning streak overall in the WPIL after Bishop Canevin and Ligonier Valley both went down. That is the only remaining carryover streak from last year. Moon won their final game of the year, but did not make the playoffs and is now 6-0 this year. Central Valley, who obviously won the state title, still rolling right along with their 18th straight win, had a nice victory over Quaker Valley. 11 remaining undefeated teams, 5 of them lost this past week. But let's talk about the losing streaks.
Yeah, let's talk about Ambridge.
Ambridge not only ended their 28-game losing streak, which was the longest overall one in the WPIAL. I'm going to hop forward for a second here. They also ended their 34-game conference losing streak, which stretched back to 2015, which meant Ambridge had not won a game a conference game since we moved to 6 classifications. And in 2016.
And it was a resounding win.
A resounding definitive win over Hopewell, who Aliquippa is their kind of cross river rival right across the bridge, but Hopewell's right on the hill above Aliquippa. So relatively close, meaningful Beaver Valley rivalry game that Ambridge got the victory there. So congratulations to them, the Bridgers. And then also congratulations to Riverview, ending their 15-game losing streak with a pretty resounding win over Amani Christian. So we've had, Northgate ended their long losing streak this year. Ambridge ended their long losing streak this year. Uniontown, who's playing an independent schedule, ended their long losing streak this year. But this was really the week for streaks being snapped overall, because in addition to Ambridge on the conference side, Waynesburg got a win over Fraser, ending their 24-game conference losing streak. Knock edged out Indiana by a point, ending their 12-game conference losing streak. And Riverview, who I just mentioned, ended an 11-game conference losing streak. So, if you look here, 4 of the 8 longest conference losing streaks all fell in the first full week of conference play. We had conference play and a few other, in a few weeks.
Those are the kind of streaks you like to see come to an end.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And those are ones that can help start build your program too. Because once you get one, then things start to become easier too. On the conference winning streak side, nothing really new there. Everyone just continued on winning. The only one that fell was Peters Township losing to Upper St. Clair, which broke an 8-game conference winning streak. I think actually their last conference loss was against Moon a few years ago, if I recall correctly. So yeah, but congratulations to all these teams. And it wasn't just in the WPIAL that we saw streaks fall. It was statewide. Wyomissing snapped Southern Columbia's 65-game winning streak, which preserved Clairton's record 66-game winning streak statewide. So the WPIAL perseveres again. I think everyone out here was rooting for Wyomissing, myself included. So congratulations to them on a big win over Southern
obviously
Columbia.
In my neck of the woods, since
Yeah.
since I drive through the school district to get to the gym every day. I mean, but yeah, it was pretty incredible. The build up for that game really started, everybody was trying to hold back the reins. Wpial was looking forward to this thing really since last year. And so to see that and to see the performance that they put in it was a pretty incredible game. Both sides played their hearts out, but Wyomissing sure showed what they're made of. And let's just hope that, and I don't think so. I think, obviously we talked to Coach Wolfram before the championship game last year with Central Valley. He's going to keep those guys focused, ultimately with the goal now of, a state championship. And man, they're just looking tough.
Yeah. Yep. And another shout out on the other side of Kennedy Catholic, out of District 10, snapping a technically 28-game losing streak, but that dated back to 2012 because they hadn't played games for that 5-year period from 2014 to 2019, winning a game with just 13 active players. That's a pretty incredible accomplishment.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. But yeah, kudos to both of those. And remember, we're going to take the Blitz show all the way to Hershey. So, and by the way, too, let's keep in mind, I don't know if I told you this, I'm going to be out that way, like out in November there. So I'm hoping that I might be able to come out and that, we might be able to do a playoff game together or get to a playoff game, you and I, like, that week there. So
yeah, that'd be fun.
They'd be PIAA games or whatever like that. But yeah, I'm out there for a Steelers game. That was a birthday present from my daughter who lives out
awesome.
there. So
that's
anyway.
great.
Yeah, it was either that she didn't want to do a Monday night game because my Bears play the Steelers on a Monday night this year, but that just wouldn't work with work and everything. So we're going to the Lions, and so nice. We'll see. I'm looking forward to that. And tell your buddy Steel City Blitz guy, that we'll have to do something special for that game.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
And our buddy Andrew Cohen with GetRecruitedConsulting.com. Pretty sure that Andrew's going to be having he's putting the final touches on having a camp out in WPIAL this year. He is getting things started early with a camp on December the 7th. I know that we had some guys from the Wpial out here last year doing some of Andrew's camps. I know that the quarterback for
Pine Richland, Cole Boyd.
Pine Richland. That's how I got to meet him, was out here at the Get Recruited camp. So got some key clients that are Wpial players that get involved with Andrew. If you ever want to know how your recruiting is going, all you have to do is just pick up the phone. Andrew will tell you. He's going to answer the phone. He's going to tell you exactly what's going on. And that's what a lot of families and that's what a lot of players want to know. They don't want to know, hey, my profile's in there and people are probably looking at it. But what are they saying? What are they, what is the evaluation on the college side? Well, that's what Andrew's going to be able to tell you. So GetRecruitedConsulting.com. Give Andrew a call.
Great. So we had one question come in this week over the Twitters from our Wpial Blitz fan question segment, which is, what are your opinions on 6 classifications versus 4? From Spencer Linn. So thank you, Spencer, for the question. He'd like to see it go back to 4 and any chance that ever happens. So I'll give my opinion first because I know what yours is, Bruce. But my opinion is I was personally a fan of 4. I felt like 4 logistically worked really well for the WPIAL. With 4 classifications with 120 schools, it was pretty easy to make 16 team playoff brackets for all 4 classifications. You could have all 4 championship games at Heinz Field in the same day. Logistically, it just worked out very well. Having seen 6 classifications for a few years now, I feel like I think it's too spread out. I think 6 is too many for how many schools there are statewide. There's a number of classifications in a number of districts where you don't even have enough to play half your season being teams in your classification in your district. I'd much rather see I think 5 personally. I think 5 is the right number. I don't think going back from 6 to 4, I feel like the cat's kind of already out of the bag. And it's going to be really hard unless we see a lot of teams like fold their football programs and just the number of football programs get reduced overall. I think it's going to be really hard to go back, but I think 5 honestly is probably about the right number for Pennsylvania. So here, I'm going to share something else here for a second. So this is the PIAA's page of, how many schools in each district are in each classification. So, to get half of your 10 game schedule, essentially, because pretty much most everyone plays a week 0 game at this point. So to get half of your schedule, even let's just say, you need six teams in your classification would be half your schedule because that would be 5 games. But, just looking at the chart, look at how many spots there are where that number is under 6. Even if you say, of a 9 game schedule, getting 4 of them against teams in your district, in your classification, that only changes like 1 number here with this, or 2 numbers, this 5 and this 5, but still, like, there's a lot of numbers on this page where there's just, you aren't even able to fill half your schedule with teams in your district, in your classification, which is why I feel like it's a little too spread out. I understand the benefits for District 1 and District 3 that are very top end loaded with the 5A, 6A, even 4A out in District 3, 4A, 5A, 6A programs. But I feel like for the rest of the state, it just stretches things out too much. So Bruce, what's your opinion?
I think that 4 was traditional. 5 I think is perfect, as you mentioned, and 6 is it's very disjointed. The one thing that we've learned is the fact that my God, you're having a 6A champion. In areas where there aren't any teams. Something's got to be done to reevaluate that. 6 is way too many. And let's just say 6 would be perfect if you could divide it equally. All right, you're seeing the districts there where, like you said, 32 6A schools in District 1, and none in even in the Wpial. Just compare the Wpial to District 1. What do we got? 8 versus 32. Something's got to give with that. Either you've got to, I think that 5 is probably the right number to get at least a reasonable facsimile of, even classifications across the whole state. So no argument for me there. And it still is a point too where a lot of the big schools then really don't have a chance to. You could do the classification such where all the big schools aren't beating up on all the small schools. Actually, with the 6 classifications, it's become much more difficult for teams to schedule because the the power rankings that most districts use, it's very unfavorable to play a team, in a classification below your own. So I think it's made it very difficult, not only to have smooth running championships, but also for teams to schedule effortlessly. So that's my take.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know there was discussions when they went to 6 classifications about like a super 600 or super 700 classification where, if teams were over a certain enrollment number, those were the only ones that could go into kind of that top one, not the kind of even divide where, the top 1/6 of schools were in 6A, the next 6th were in 5A, so on and so forth. And that may be something to kind of help alleviate some of that. But I think only 1 or 2 Wpial schools would have even qualified for that super 700. It was pretty much all the like Philly area schools that were
look, and I've touched on that a number of times during these broadcasts of how I think that it's so totally unfair, the fact that you've got the majority of 6A teams in one, that are funneling out through just one avenue. I mean, you can't, how can you treat so many 6A schools the same way as you're going to treat a Wpial or a District 3 or a District 11? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad that I don't have to make up the rules. All I know is that, there's something can be done to make things, I think, a little bit more balanced.
Yeah. Well, the real solution that no one wants to talk about is redrawing the district lines. Everyone kind of established the district lines where they are, and 12 districts in and of itself may be a little cumbersome. I mean, if you had a completely blank slate, there should be 8 districts. So each district champion went into, a quarterfinal slot that would make perfect sense in the playoff bracket. But obviously the districts aren't evenly distributed. There's different size schools everywhere, and it is what it is. But I'm just saying, in a perfect ideal world, would be kind of how it worked out. But
that's a great question. We appreciate the question, because it created a nice little segment here in the program.
Yes. So, thank you very much to Spencer for asking the question. And if anyone else would like to have a question answered, feel free to send us a message on Twitter at Wpial Blitz and Badgley Bruce.
SSP Network. I mean, EPA football, whatever. I mean, definitely. And it doesn't have to be in the form of, a DM either. Just send it to us right on Twitter. We'll make sure it makes the show.
Yep.
I mean, it's a great way that the fans can get in on the show. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Yes, definitely. So a rundown of where we are now after we've moved into conference play. As we know, we're in conference play across the board now. So just a quick reminder on how many teams from each conference will make the playoffs eventually. This is the first time the Wpial for quite a while now has not had, I'll say, even playoff brackets. There's going to be teams that have first round buys kind of across the board, except in 2A is the only one where you're not going to have first round buys. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all plays out once we get to the postseason, this being the first year of sort of this setup. So how the standings are set up, conference record, as we've talked about, is the first and primary organizer, followed by head-to-head results between teams that are tied with the same record, followed by Gardner points being the next tiebreaker, which is a strength of victory metric. So basically 10 Gardner points for each victory of the teams you defeated in conference play, and then tiebreaker points, which is basically a margin of victory metric. So up to plus 10 or minus 10 based on results versus conference opponents. So if you have any questions, feel free to check out the standings page on steelcityblitz.com, which is the only standings page around that shows all of the tiebreakers in one place.
All right. Yes, sir.
So,
we love that.
Yeah. So here's some quick screenshots too. And a quick rundown. Mount Lebanon, coming off that big win over North Allegheny, now gets to take on Central Catholic in what will be probably the best 6A game of the week statewide. I didn't mention in my streak watch that St. Joe's Prep also lost. lost to LaSalle College. So, another.
Well, yeah, that's like as a state game. I mean, they've had a few losses here and there, but I mean, and they lost to a team from Georgia. So yeah, I don't know how that all works. So
Still,
because they play a
anytime.
national schedule.
Yeah. Anytime St. Joe's Prep loses, it's noteworthy.
I'll tell you what, the best thing on Twitter all week was your tweet out there about when was the last time that St. Joe Prep and Southern Columbia lost in the same week. That should have got the award of tweet of the week in Pennsylvania.
Didn't get an answer for that. I figured Dave Mike out at EPA football would have known that, but I didn't. He's got that whole database he could have scrolled through, but I didn't get a response. So, but
that's because it didn't favor those two. So
yeah, I mean, my best guess would be that it probably would have happened like on a state championship game weekend if they both lost in the championship game, but Southern Columbia's won so many of them that I don't know the answer. That's why
right. I mean, the last championship game that St. Joe Prep lost was to Pine Richland.
Yeah.
And I think Southern won the 2A title that year. So that would be the last time. I'd have to kind of rewind to that, but
maybe I'll have to do some more research.
Okay,
maybe we'll have an answer for next week
as we get into like the transition to the statewide stuff.
Yes. So Mount Lebanon and Central Catholic will be battling it out for the top spot in the conference. Cannon Mac and Seneca Valley, a nice game between two teams kind of in the middle, and North Allegheny probably will come back and finish in the top three. I think they're better than both Cannon Mac and Seneca Valley, but Cannon Mac's been playing really well so far this year. And, 5 teams here are going to make the playoffs. So I think there's a pretty fair split between the top 5 and the bottom 3. Baldwin got off the Schneid, won their first game of the season with a win over Norwin this past week. So congratulations to the Fighting Highlanders of Baldwin. But this Mount Lebanon Central Catholic game, Central's defense has just been outstanding this season, and Mount Lebanon has been really good on both offense and defense. So, but I
mean, even in the game that they lost to Imhotep, I mean, what was it, 14-10,
12-6, I think.
12-6. Okay.
No one made an extra point, but yeah. But yeah, it's going to be a good one. And it's going to be interesting to see if Central's defensive line, especially with Notre Dame commit Donovan Heinisch, can, disrupt what all the things Mount Lebanon does on offense, or if, Mount Lebanon can look to get the better of them. And really, too, let's not forget, with only 8 teams here and 5 making the playoffs, these teams are all going to see each other again in the playoffs at some point. So, actually my preseason prediction was that Central Catholic would win the regular season conference title, but Mount Lebanon would win the championship. So, this game will decide, who gets a first round bye.
It's anticlimactic, even in a 5-game conference schedule. Let's be real.
And it's more who gets a first round bye.
Yeah, right.
Rather than
they're going to see each other again. I mean, it's
probably.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right, moving on to 5A, where we just started conference play. The biggest surprise probably was Upper St. Clair just pasting Peters Township 31-3 this past week. Peters have been off to a really good start. Like Coach Linn mentioned at the beginning, they graduated a bunch of kids, including 2 D1 kids, but, had really looked like they had found replacements for him. And then Upper St. Clair, shout out to Ethan Heister, who ran for 3 touchdowns and a really good game all around for him, putting Upper St. Clair back into the mix potentially, for the conference title. I mean, it's only 1 game, but there's only 4 more, so every win's going to matter here. 4 of these teams are going to make the conference, but man, this is really a murderous row of a conference. I mean, this is like the SEC of the WPIAL. I mean, all 6 of these teams are really good. When we talked last week about how I had kind of, run some numbers, run that the same formula that District 3 uses, like if you recall, a lot of like all 6 of these teams were kind of in the top half of, or at least, top half-ish of 5A. So it's these are 6 really good teams, and unfortunately only 4 of them are going to make the playoffs.
Yep.
In the Big East Conference, everyone kind of took care of business. Gateway, Penn Trafford, Franklin Regional all winning. So now we get a Gateway against Penn Trafford game that is the game of the week in 5A, pretty much with the conference title on the line. I mean, they're going to have to play other games, but they're pretty clearly the best two teams. They should pretty easily beat all the rest of the teams. So, yes, a week 6 game probably will eventually decide who wins the conference title. In the Northeast Conference, Pine Richland edged out Penn Hills 21-14 this past week in a close game. North Hills got a last-second touchdown to beat Kiski, who had previously been undefeated, which left Moon as the only unbeaten team in 5A. And Fox Chapel got a win over Shaler, but we'll see, kind of how this all plays out. Fox Chapel got beat pretty handily early in the season by some other teams. So I don't really, and Shaler's kind of been a down team. They didn't have a win at all last year. So, I'm expecting Pine Richland, Penn Hills, North Hills, Kiski probably to be the 4 teams that come out of here, but we'll see how it all plays out. Moving on to 4A, the Big 8 Conference, Bell Vernon with their 2 big wins over Thomas Jefferson and Laurel Highlands the last 2 weeks.
It seems weird to see them in the middle of the page, Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, and part of that too is that they didn't play a conference game last week because they were scheduled to play Uniontown, but then Uniontown opted to play an independent schedule, so they had the week off. They weren't able to fill it or didn't want to fill it. They just didn't play. So yeah, Thomas Jefferson's in the middle, but they have a game against Laurel Highlands, and they'll play McKeesport here in a few weeks too, so they'll pretty quickly bounce back up onto the top half of the page. 4 of these teams make the conference or make the playoffs. So Laurel Highlands already with wins over Ringgold and West Mifflin. They've got kind of a murderer's row here. They played Bell Vernon, they play TJ this week, they play McKeesport next week. So really it's probably going to come down to that Laurel Highlands against Trinity game for who gets that last playoff spot. Trinity did get that win over West Mifflin, although Ringgold's been playing a little bit better. Could potentially when Ringgold plays Trinity, that could factor into the playoff race as well. Although Trinity has a non-conference game against Clearfield this week, who has, I believe, a quarterback who's like 6'5", 6'6", like 250 pounds. So that kid from Clearfield is something.
Yeah.
But TJ against Laurel Highlands, definitely the game of the week here in this conference, as Laurel Highlands looks to bounce back from their loss to Bell Vernon, and Thomas Jefferson also coming off a loss to Bell Vernon since they didn't play last week. In the Greater Allegheny Conference, this is the one that we've said from the beginning of the year had the potential to get crazy. Plum started 0-4, bounced back with a win last week over Highlands, where they won 23-21, kicked a field goal with about 5 minutes left, and were able to hold on defensively. So after an 0-4 start, Plum is now back into the middle of the pack, and potentially making some noise. Indiana beat Plum the first week of conference play here, but then have dropped their last 2 games to Greensburg Salem and to Knock, to kind of fall back down the conference ladder. Hampton beat Greensburg Salem handily, as we talked about at the opening of the show this past week. So Hampton has a pretty clear path now to the conference title. Just have to get a win this week over Plum, potentially to win it outright, or potentially be able to share it because of Plum's loss. So Hampton off to a great start, looking to get their first conference title since, I believe, 2013 or 14 was their last one.
Wow,
somewhere
that's
in that time
impressive.
frame. So good for the Talbots there. Also in 4A, the Parkway Conference started conference play this week. Aliquippa beat Beaver, Chartiers Valley beat Blackhawk, and Newcastle beat Montour on that last second touchdown. So, off to a strong start. Aliquippa and Char Valley were the top 2 teams in the conference last year. They meet this week with the top spot in the conference on the line once again. And we'll see what happens. That Blackhawk Montour game could be important come playoff time, because 4 out of these teams are going to make the playoffs as well. Moving on to 3A, North Catholic continued their dominance with a big 56-0 win over Burrell. The real story here, though, is Deer Lakes, off to a 3-0 start in conference play after not winning a single game last year and starting the season 0-3.
That's great. That's quite a turnaround.
That is quite the turnaround for the Lancers. Yeah, so congratulations to Deer Lakes. Got that win over East Allegheny this past week, and with with 4 teams making the playoffs here, Deer Lakes has really put themselves in good position to make the postseason with those big wins over Derry, Valley, and East Allegheny. And really with their game against Burrell this week, I mean, they wouldn't mathematically clinch a playoff spot, but they could put themselves in really good position to essentially be, in a playoff caliber position. In the Interstate Conference, Elizabeth Forward beat South Park, who was also off to a 2-0 start. York and Brownsville. Brownsville finally scored. That's about all I can say for them. They lost 63-6. They've just been, it's been hard times for Brownsville, which was, a team that was struggling in 2A and their enrollment forced them up to 3A. And that's one of those situations where it's like, if they have this, whatever you want to call it, competitive balance formula to move teams up, their success formula that have had success.
Same thing to move them down.
They gotta be able to move teams down, because that's
They do it in the Lancaster Lebanon League a lot, where they've got 5A and 6A teams, because they have a difficult time, competing against the, other 5 and 6A teams. They move them down to section 3 and 4 to give them an opportunity. I'm not opposed to that. And with the power rankings, you can do that. Okay. The way that the Wpial does it, you can't do that. Okay. I mean, I don't know what else to say. The power ranking formula allows you to do that. The Wpial, the way that you do the ranking strictly on conference, you can't do that.
Yeah. And this conference is really going to come down to Elizabeth Forward against Mount Pleasant in a few weeks for essentially the conference title. The Northwest 6 Conference, Central Valley and Avonworth are pretty clearly the 2 best teams here. But that being said, 4 out of these 6 teams are going to make the playoffs. So, Ambridge's win over Hopewell not only was big for snapping their losing streaks, but now really they just have to beat Quaker Valley in a few weeks to potentially make the playoffs, which is wild.
What was jumping into your camera angle there? Was that somebody?
Oh, that was just me talking with my hands.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay.
That was me.
I thought one of the kids was up.
No, that's just me talking with my hands because I can't help myself.
That's all right.
But yeah, and Quaker Valley against Hopewell this week, of 2 teams, that have 1 win between them. But if Quaker Valley wins, that essentially sets up a Quaker Valley Ambridge game with a playoff spot on the line. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy. Moving on to 2A.
Sarah Catholic is the best team that nobody is talking about in the state of Pennsylvania, in my mind.
They're a really darn good team with a really darn good defense. I mean, their defense has scored so many times this year. I mean, they've had games with 2 defense. They've had multiple games with 2 defensive scores,
and they got a killer offense. I mean, they have a complete team there. And like I said, hey, look, blood's in the water. Okay, so Southern Columbia lost, so. I tell you what, I've got
Sarah and
will a slipper fit Sarah Catholic?
Yeah, and Sarah and Stowe Rocks, met in that epic semifinal last year and kind of look like they're on a collision course for the championship game this year. That they look like the best 2 teams in 2A. Sarah's been really good, but I agree, and I think part of it is that Sarah hasn't smoked anyone. They've beaten teams 35-0 or 39-7 or something
they haven't
like that.
Run up the score.
Exactly. They don't have a 63-6 win like Stowe Rocks did this past week, which, I mean, great performance by Stowe Rocks, don't get me wrong. But they haven't
Not
put up
required.
a 60 or a 70 that's really gotten attention. So yeah, they're a really darn good team. And yeah, I mean, Steel Valley didn't win a conference game last year, although they had a couple get canceled too. But got that big win over Ligonier Valley now and look like, the team to challenge Sarah for the top spot in the conference. So we'll see that in a few weeks. But Sarah's got a tough game against a good Ligonier Valley team this week, which will be a good, I mean, Ligonier Valley's 0-1, which is why they're down here, but like they're 5-1 overall. They were 5-0 going into that Steel Valley game.
I know,
So
exactly.
That's gonna be a good matchup between Sarah and Ligonier Valley.
And see, that's where the body of work hurts a team like Ligonier Valley. Okay, so they've got 5 wins preseason. What does that matter? It doesn't. They get in their conference play here, they lose a couple of games, and they're behind the 8 ball. See, any chance I get to like put a jab in here,
yeah, and three of these teams are guaranteed a playoff spot and possibly a 4th. So we'll keep an eye on that.
That'd be tough if Ligonier Valley doesn't make it.
They'll make it. They'll be fine. The Century Conference, congratulations to Waynesburg on snapping that 24-game conference losing streak. Frazier's really a team that's in trouble, and they were a team, they finished 3rd. Last year they just missed making the playoffs, and they were a team I thought could really compete in the middle of the pack and off to an 0-6 start. So, I took credit earlier for calling the West Green thing, but this is one where I'll be critical of myself that I thought they were going to be better than they are. But this conference is really shaping up to be a Washington McGuffey showdown for the conference title, as it has been the last few years as well. The Midwestern Conference, Mohawk's one of the big surprises in the WPIAL this year, off to a 3-0 start with wins over a good Neshannock team and a decent New Brighton team. And Laurel's just been smoking everybody, I guess, except Beaver Falls, although they still beat Beaver Falls pretty handily in the second half. I think that was 39-21. They kind of ran away with that one at the end. Laurel was my preseason pick to win the conference, even though Beaver Falls was the defending WPIAL champions. I really liked what they brought to the table, and I've been vindicated a bit here so far. But this will be a good week to see where Mohawk really is with that game against Beaver Falls. If Beaver Falls can potentially get back into the top 2nd or 3rd place spot in the conference, or if Mohawk really is a contender with Laurel for the conference title. In the Three Rivers Conference, Stowe Rocks is the team that's just been killing everybody. 284 points through 6 games is a pretty impressive margin. I mean, they've just been really dominant. I mean, that's 47 points a game that they're averaging. Just a dominant offensive performance from Stowe Rocks, and look like the team to beat. Congratulations also to Carleton, who beat Brentwood. Carleton hasn't been super successful in conference play, kind of a rebuilding program for a while. I think they have the 2nd longest playoff drought in the WPIAL, behind Leechburg, who we'll talk about in a minute. But Carleton with that win, potentially top 3 here, make the playoffs. Just have to win a couple more games and potentially could get in. Moving on to 1A, Cornell now sitting atop the Big 7 conference after Rochester beat Ulsh this past weekend, and Union, who upset Rochester in week 1, has now lost 2 relatively close games in a row against Cornell this past week and Northgate the week before. So it's Union's now potentially looking up at having to compete for a playoff spot now. The top 5 make the playoffs here, so a lot of open races here across the board for getting into the playoffs. And Fort Cherry, whose coach we interviewed last year, beat Northgate by 1 point this past week. Northgate, who's, like we said, snapped that long losing streak earlier this year, and whose coach we interviewed this year. Right. And I mean, Northgate's playing well. They're competing. That was a 29-28 game that Fort Cherry won. So, congratulations to Fort Cherry, but also, I mean, those Northgate kids are out there playing hard every single week, and you can see it. They're playing close games. And that's also kind of reflected here in the tiebreakers that, the margin of victory tiebreakers, right? You win by 10, you win by more than 10, right? You win by 30, you still get 10 points. You lose by 30, still get a -10. So like Burgettstown, they've gotten blown out in all 3 of their losses, but like to be only a -5, they're competing in their games and they're in them. So congratulations to Northgate there. Lots of big games across, like with so many teams bunched so close together here in the standings. Pretty much every game's a big game this week here that'll help kind of sort out the playoff picture. In the Eastern Conference, Leechburg beat Jeanette for the first time ever this past week. So
Wow.
congratulations to Leechburg, putting themselves in position to break their 32-year playoff drought. They haven't made the postseason since 1988, longest streak in the WPIAL. So sitting at 5-1 overall, 2-1 in the conference. Their only loss was to Clairton, and then Clairton got
Let's
that
see
big
how they
win.
do this week.
Yep. And Clairton got that big win over Bishop Canavan, 28-18, to kind of solidify themselves still as the team to beat in the conference. And, really now with that win over Canavan, win over Leechburg, really it's just kind of Greensburg Central Catholic in there that would potentially have a shot at Clairton, with all of the group of teams with one loss. But 5 teams here are going to make the playoffs. So, you got your top 4 with some separation, but one out of these bottom teams also has a shot still to make the playoffs as well. And Springdale's a team that kind of surprised me. I mean, they were off to a 3-0 start. I thought they'd be pretty good, and they got beat pretty handily by Greensburg Central Catholic this past week, 35-0. So Dynamo's looking to bounce back this week against the Jeanette team that's still kind of struggling with, all the replacement players they've had to bring in. And finally, in the Tri-County South, West Green got that win over Carmichael's after beating California a few weeks ago. So they are now the only undefeated team after Monessen lost to Mapletown. So congratulations to the Maples getting themselves into the playoff hunt. And now West Green has a pretty clear path to the conference title, being the only unbeaten team in the Tri-County South. So that's a quick rundown of the standings. We'll be getting into more details next week as we, continue on through conference play into week 6 as we start to get into the final half of the season. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We appreciate it. Thanks for the folks that sent us questions on Twitter. Thanks to Coach Linn from Moon area for joining us on the show, and best of luck to the Tigers this week and the rest of the season.
Yeah, the funny thing is that there's so much that goes through this whole show, that we deal with here and that you deal with, and that is very intriguing. So I guess that's the good part about like YouTube, is that you can kind of move things around a little bit too. I mean, on what item that you watch, at a given time there. But anyway, all right, Ian. Hey, listen, can you go back to
Oh yeah,
we'll say goodbye, and then we'll go back to the other screen there. So
Yep.
For my buddy Ian, I'm Bruce Badgley. Listen, thanks for sticking with us on the WPIAL Blitz show as we fly all around here. We'll be back next week. So take care, and we'll see you later.